All right, in today's explainer, we are diving into a piece of tech that's trying to make money move at the speed of the internet. It's called the Strike API. We're going to break down how it works, why it could be such a game changer, and what it might mean for how we pay for just about everything.
Okay, let's just stop and think about this for a second. Have you ever really wondered why this is? It's kind of a fundamental disconnect in our digital world, right? You can stream a movie from halfway across the planet instantly, no problem. But sending money to that very same place, it can feel like you're sending a package by boat. It just feels completely out of place today. And this, right here, this is the whole problem in a nutshell. You've got information on one side, messages, data, you name it, and it just flows. It's instant, it's global. But then you look at money, and it's like it's stuck on these old, rusty railroad tracks. It's slow, it gets chewed up by fees, and it often gets stuck at the border. This is the exact friction that a system like Strike is built to just get rid of.
So how do you fix a system that's so old and clunky? Well, you don't necessarily have to tear the whole thing down. Instead, you can build a bridge, and that's exactly what the Strike API is designed to be. A bridge that connects the world we know, with currencies like the dollar, to these new, high-speed digital payment networks.
So the key thing to get here is that the Strike API is what's called an abstraction layer. The best way to think about it is like driving a car. You don't need to be a mechanic who understands the combustion engine to get where you're going. You just use the steering wheel and the pedals. The API does the same thing. It hides all the crazy complexity of things like Bitcoin and the Lightning Network so that any developer can build a global payment app without having to be some kind of crypto genius.
What's really smart about this setup is how safe they make it for developers to build and experiment. Before they even touch a real cent, they get to play in what's called a sandbox. It's basically a perfect copy of the real system, but all the money is fake, like Monopoly money. This lets them test everything, try to break things, and fix bugs, all without any real-world risk. Then, once everything is working perfectly, they just flip a switch and go live in production.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how a transaction actually works. The best way to picture it is as a really precise three-step digital handshake. It's designed for speed, but more importantly, for certainty. So it starts simple. First, an invoice gets issued. That's just the request for payment. But here's the really clever part. To deal with the fact that digital asset prices can change really fast, this system doesn't transact right away. Instead, it generates a quote, which locks in the price and all the fees for a very short window of time. Finally, once the user says go, that quote is executed. The deal is done. This quote execute two-step is absolutely critical for making sure everything is fair and transparent. And you gotta understand, that quote, it's got a ticking clock on it. It's not a forever offer. It has to be executed within a few seconds or it just expires. This is a great feature because it protects both the person sending the money and the person receiving it from any sudden price swings. Everybody gets the exact value they agreed to, right down to the penny.
Okay, but we're talking about money, right? So the number one question is always going to be, is it safe? If developers are building all sorts of apps on top of this thing, how does the API handle access and keep the vault locked tight?
Well, they have this really smart two-key system. For business that's just managing its own money, it uses something called an API key. You can think of that as the master key to your own company's vault. But if you're building an app that needs to connect to a user's Strike account, you use something different called OAuth Connect. This is more like a valet key. The user gives your app permission to do very specific things for a limited time without ever sharing their password. It's secure and they can revoke it at any time.
And to keep your app in the loop in real time, the API uses a system that works a lot like tracking a package you ordered online. When a payment status changes, say from pending to paid, Strike doesn't just broadcast all that sensitive financial info over the internet. No way. Instead, it just sends a tiny secure little ping, a webhook, that basically says, hey, order number 123 has an update. Your app then uses that ID to securely go and pull the latest details directly from Strike's servers. It's super efficient and way more secure.
Okay, so we've looked at the why and the how. Let's zoom back out and talk about the so what. What does building this kind of new financial plumbing for the internet actually mean for the world? What does it unlock?
I mean, just look at this chart. The difference is, well, it's night and day. We're going from the old way, that's the tall bar, with high costs and waiting days for your money, to a new world of nearly zero cost and instant settlement. This isn't just a little bit better, it's a totally different way of thinking about how value moves around the planet.
And this kind of efficiency, it opens up whole new business models that were literally impossible before. I'm talking about micropayments. With the old credit card systems, the fee to send money was often more than the payment itself. But with this tech, you can send a fraction of a cent. Just imagine paying a tiny amount to read one news article, or stream a single song, or use an AI for just a few seconds. The possibilities are huge.
And this really gets to the most powerful idea of all. And it's captured perfectly in this quote from the source material. The end goal here is to completely change how we think about money. To stop treating it like this special, heavy, clunky thing that's stuck in old pipes, and start treating it just like any other kind of data on the internet. Something that's programmable, fluid, and instant.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. When all that friction of moving value basically disappears, when sending $1 or a cent or even a fraction of a cent becomes as cheap and easy as sending an email, what happens then? What new ideas, what new businesses, and what new ways of connecting with people all over the world will we build? Thanks for joining this explainer.